Light, light, light. Where do I even begin? Lighting in 3D may sound really easy on paper because everything is calculated well for you, unlike 2D artists where they have to paint in all the lights and shadows manually. But even with that, nailing a good lighting setup may require for you to put in extra effort and a few techniques. But once you have understood all these foundations and the base of the lighting, doing this is going to be the most fun thing to do because it can display any sort of mood you want and highlight anything you want for the viewers to see first. And there is also no right or wrong in doing any sort of lighting. This is why it is going to be a bit difficult to do this tutorial, but in a couple of seconds I'm going to try my best to explain what to expect in this video. If you search up lighting tutorials on YouTube, you'll see so many videos out there. This is because lighting is one of the broadest topic in 3D. So many people can interpret it in so many different ways, but one thing I've noticed from all these videos is that they haven't really explained what I'm about to explain in this video. But before we start off, I need to give a quick disclaimer here in this video like always. I'll not show you how to light your scenes, particularly because everything is different and everyone has a different view on what looks the best. Instead, I'll show you some of the techniques and some of the key factors you should be aware of even before you start lighting your scenes. So after watching this video, hopefully you'll have a strong foundation to base off of the next time you do a 3D scene and have a good lighting that you will love. If you like most of the videos that I've uploaded, please consider subscribing because one of the main things that I keep in mind every time I do a tutorial is to keep it as broad as possible while explaining the most important things that you need to know. That way there is still room for your creative minds to interpret and learn more even after watching these videos. Because of this, you can develop your own style slowly without worrying about following a tutorial quite closely and strictly, thinking this is the only best way to approach. After all, developing a workflow that works the best for you will help you a lot in the long run, and knowing that there is no right or wrong, that is the pure beauty of art. But this has already been a really long intro, so let's get started. I'll break this video down into two parts. Firstly, I will give you a quick rundown over the basics of all the lights that are in Blender. After that, we'll finally talk about the technique while giving you some of the examples and tips and tricks along the way. In Blender, we have four main lights. Now we'll talk about these four lights first before we get into anything atmosphere related, because adding volumetrics or atmosphere elements can change how the lights work. First of all, we have the point light. You can visualize this as a sphere with emission on it. It casts light and shadow 360 degrees around the radius. You can change the radius by the settings on the right hand side, where you can also change the intensity, light color, and if you want it to cast shadows or not. By changing the radius, as you can see, it can determine whether the shadows are sharp or blurry. The larger the radius is, the blurrier the shadows will get, and the smaller the radius is, the sharper the shadows will be. Next up, we have the sunlight. It is also known as directional light in other softwares. This light is omnidirectional. That means that it has no specific source, therefore it doesn't really matter if your things are further away or closer to the source that you added, they will still get affected by this light. Just like any other light, you can change the color, the strength on the properties tab. As you play around with the angle, you can change how soft or harsh the shadows are. Onto spotlight. Spotlights are literally just like actual spotlights in real life. As with any other lights, you can change the power, radius, and you can also change the shape of the beam. Spotlights are really good when you want to highlight certain things in your scene. And finally, we have our area lights. Area lights are usually just a plane that shines a light from just one direction. And they can be in different shapes. They can be in squares, circles, ellipses, and rectangles. By changing the size of the shape, you can control how sharp or blurry the shadows are. Again, just like other lights, you can change the intensity, color in the properties tab. One new feature added to area lights is the spread. It is basically just the spread of the light. If you tone it down, it will shine a sharper rectangular light onto whatever surface you have. Area lights are great when you're using those to support your lamps or to act as a skylight. And we also have something called HDRIs. They are called environment textures in Blender. To use them, go to the World tab and in color, choose environment texture and choose whatever HDRI that you have downloaded. HDRIs are 360 degrees captured scene file that stores light and shadow information from real life. The HDRIs can be different things like daylight, sunset, or studio room, or something as small as a bedroom, for instance. HDRIs are really cool in simulating real life lighting scenarios. And finally, we have volumes. Volumes are a good way to simulate atmosphere and depth in your scenes. The way I like to add volume is to add a huge cube that covers up the entire scene and change the texture into either a volume scatter or a principled volume shader. Plug that into volume and lower down the density. Volumes can affect how lights work in your scene, so just be aware of that, and also it can increase the render time of your scenes. There may be so many videos that you have watched where they have explained either to use a 3-point lighting setup for a product render, or to not light it from behind the camera but instead to light it from in front of the camera when you're doing an exterior scene, or to use a blue neon color light to display a sense of loneliness or sadness into your renders, or to use a red or orange glowing color to show the scariness of this image. I'm not saying these don't work, they definitely do, but these videos never tell you what the reason behind this is. And when it comes to lighting, the purpose of your scene is the most important part. This is why before you even begin lighting your scene, you should ask yourself these 3 simple questions. Where is this scene located? Is it outdoors? Or is it indoors? Is it in the middle of the forest? Or is it in an open field? The next question is what type of mood it has. This also goes hand in hand with what time of day it is supposed to be taken at, and what's the main focus of this piece. Depending on the answers of these 3 questions, you can either expand your answers further or you can work from here. Let me show you some examples using a few artworks that have been provided by either me or a few of my artist friends who are kind enough to let me use their artworks as examples in this video. Let's talk about location first. When I made this artwork, I knew that it was going to be a forest scene, but it's not going to be super crowded with trees. It should be somewhat of an open area, but also have the right amount of vegetation where they should be and not get super crowded. As for the mood, I want something that is like early in the morning and it's gloomy, soft and dreamy. Maybe it has just finished raining. These sort of breakdowns for your own scene can help you when it comes to actually lighting your scene. Next, I want to make sure that the viewers are more focused on the bike in the middle over here. This should be the area where the main focus is, but also keeping the atmosphere quite right so we can see all the distant figures quite nicely. Once I've made all these mental notes about all these questions, I could start lighting using each individual answer as a pinpoint for what to do in my scene. For instance, because I have decided what location this is in, I know how to properly light my scene. And because I've decided that it's an early morning and it should be gloomy and soft, I know that I have to use an HDRI that has no directional sunlight value in the HDRI itself, but just an overcast lighting, and use a soft sun lamp within the scene. And by using the correct volume, we should get this look. And because I want to make sure that we are focusing more on the bike, I make sure that the sun is directly pointing at the bike. To exaggerate this even further, I like to add what I call fake lights. They're basically an additional light, whether it be a point light or an area light or even a spotlight that is shining directly at the subject that you want to shine the light on. Now this piece is one of my earliest works. Despite the composition being really hard to read in this one, there is also another obvious mistake. It is trying to light the scene from behind the camera. Now with the right amount of shadows that are being casted, even lighting from behind the camera can occasionally work, but for this particular piece, this is not the case. Because one thing you should also focus on when it comes to lighting is to make sure that you have a good amount of ratio between shadow and light. As opposed to this artwork where the direction of the sun is almost similar to each other, but it has proper amount of shadows to make sure that the image is still readable and not too flat. One quick tip is that if your background should be in focus, your foreground should be darker than the background. Quick way to do that is to add a plane on top of your foreground that is outside the view of your camera. This is an artwork by Hulib. He does these amazing moody renders every single day, and one thing he nails every time is the feeling that we get when we view his artworks. One thing that he did exceptionally in this piece is to bring out our point of interest into this cube head. As you can see, amongst this very monotone environment and foggy environment, one thing stands out to you the most. That is the glowing orange of the cube head. Lights can be used that way as well to bring point of interest into your art pieces. This is also another good example to show using lights to show point of interest in your artwork. Now the main light of this scene is basically just a spotlight that is coming from the top right angle that is shining directly at this cube person. Now this is why answering the 3 questions that I've mentioned before is so critical when it comes to lighting on scenes, because once you've done that, you know what to light with, where to light, and what type of lights to use. This is an artwork by Asmo. The understanding of light and shadow is best displayed by this man over here. According to my understanding, he does not use any other lights apart from the main sun lamp in his scenes. With that, he perfectly captures the mood of the entire scene while keeping some of the areas of the ground in shadows and keeping that contrast intact so that it doesn't look flat and have a lot of interest in our eyes. Since lighting does not have any right or wrong, make sure you have different lighting setups and save each iteration for each lighting setup and choose the best. Because instead of making just one good lighting setup, you could do a few good lighting setups and choose the best lighting setup that you have. And my final tip, if you have characters in your scene and if you want to separate them from the background, best way to do it is to have a rim light around them. That way it naturally highlights the characters while still keeping the believability intact for your artwork. Now thank you so much for watching this video. I hope you guys enjoyed it and learned a thing or two from this one, because this video took so long to make. Covering about lighting is very difficult because it can be very broad and it can also be interpreted in so many different ways like I mentioned before. But I hope I did a good job explaining most of the things that I understood in all the years that I've been working as a 3D artist. If you think this video is helpful, please make sure to subscribe and also follow me on Instagram. I'll leave the links to my socials down below in the description, and I'll see you guys next time.